Hello, welcome to our series of key conversations that we have been doing here at the Chanzo with the key people on the ground trying to transform our communities, nations, and the world in general. And today we have the honor to have this conversation with Mr. Mitchel. Mr. Mitchel is the president of the US-based non-profit organization that works to promote and strengthen democratic institutions around the world. And he is here in Tanzania as a part of his African tour. He has already visited Ivory Coast. He also visited Ethiopia. And now he's here in Tanzania. He's been here for 2 days as he's winding up his African tour. First of all, Mr. Mitchel, you're welcome very much in Tanzania. And I hope that you had a time to maybe move around and see the views of the city.
It's a beautiful, beautiful city.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've only been here 2 days. I haven't seen nearly enough.
Yeah.
But I've seen enough to know this is a beautiful place I need to come back to.
Okay, thank you very much. So before we head to our conversation with our guest here, I am going to spend a couple of minutes to read about Mr. Mitchel, just so that you have the idea who he is and the accomplishment that he has been able to register as a person. So he was appointed as the president of NDI in 2018, but from 2012 to 2016, Mr. Mitchel served as U.S. ambassador to the Republic of the Union of Myanmar, formerly known as Burma. He was America's first ambassador to the country in 22 years. From 2011 to 2012, he served as the U.S. Department of State's first special representative and policy coordinator for Burma with the rank of ambassador. Prior to that appointment, Mitchel served as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, Asian and Pacific Security Affairs, APSA, in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. In that capacity, he spent 6 months as Acting APCA Assistant Secretary of Defense and was responsible for overseeing the Defense Department's security policy in Northeast, Southeast, South, and Central Asia. For his service, he received the Office of the Secretary of Defense Award for Distinguished Public Service in August 2011. He co-authored a book titled China, The Balance Sheet, What the World Needs to Know About the Emerging Superpower, published in 2006. And another book titled China and the Developing World, Beijing Strategy for the 21st Century. So this is a little bit about Mr. Mitchel, and I'm going to admit that you have a very accomplished and decorated career.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Appreciate it.
Yeah. And so this is taking me straight to the, our conversation. And first of all, I would like to, as I said in the beginning, it's an honor to us as a media outlet to have this opportunity to sit down and have this conversation with you. And so I was wondering, why are you in Tanzania, for example, and why now? I mean, not last year or next year.
Well, I wanted to come to Tanzania for many years. There was a pandemic, unfortunately, for a few years, and I couldn't travel anywhere. So this has actually been delayed for a bit of time. But I'm very excited. You mentioned the tour I've just made of the continent, of the African continent. It's a very important time for the continent, for Africa. And I think that Tanzania is going to be central to the future of this continent in the 21st century. And I think much of the history of the 21st century is going to be written on this continent because of the demographics and the dynamism that I know about and what I've seen firsthand here. We haven't had an office, NDI, since 2014 here, but we've been working in partnership on programs with your people on the democratic development of Tanzania for almost 20 years, since 2004. And there's no way that you can understand a country or programs without seeing it firsthand. So I've been itching to come to Tanzania for a while. I know the history of the great history of this country. I follow the democratic direction. And I feel like now there is an interesting moment of sort of liberalization, re-liberalization occurring that NDI as an institute wants to be engaged in partnership with your people.
Yeah.
So if there's anything that we can continue to do to continue that momentum for democracy here, we would like to be partners of that endeavor. And I felt it was important for me to be here listening and learning for a few days.
Yeah, and what has, been some of activities that you have, being involved in while you were here in Tanzania? I mean, if you'd be willing to share.
Absolutely. No, and some of it has been in public, meeting with the leaders of major political parties, with the CCM, with Chadema, with the ACT, meeting with former President Kikwete, meeting with senior advisors. I'll be meeting with civil society organizations right after this meeting, part of a Ushiriki Participate Tanzania program, coalition. So it's been a fascinating cross-section of society, but not enough. It's only in the capital. And I recognize it's a big country, a very diverse country.
Yeah.
And I haven't been to Zanzibar, which is a very important part of our work. And unfortunately, I really wanted to go, but given flights.
Well, that's really unfortunate that you're not going.
It's really unfortunate. It's, again, a rich cultural place, a very unique political environment.
Yeah.
We're very deeply engaged in partnership with President Mwinyi. So again, I'll have to come back.
Yeah.
And I've tried to learn from the outset.
Yeah, please do. And so what impression did you get meeting all these key players in Tanzania's democratic process? Like you said, you met with the leaders of major political parties and probably with other key stakeholders. And what impression did you get, of the Tanzania's democratic trajectory?
Well, you come out of a very difficult period. I think the sort of trauma of that period still lingers. And there's I think a general consensus among all that let's not find ourselves in that situation again. Let's see if we can move the democracy forward. I think there are differences in terms of pace and scale of that change between parties. Some talking about slower, some quicker, desire quicker change. But a general consensus, I think, on the desirability of remaining on a more liberalized and hopefully democratic track. I think there was a consensus, for instance, on some of the things that NDI works on, which is the empowerment, the greater political empowerment and involvement of women in the politics of society here, of young people, youth, given the demographics here, as well as the countries that I went to in the entire continent. There is an absolute imperative that young people be given a voice and given a stake in this system. And that people with disabilities as well. In a sense, we've heard in all of our meetings, the real importance of that and of electoral reform going forward. Yeah.
So back to NDI, and you said you have been here for quite some time now, and you've been involved in, well, I'm not sure if it's a right word, but the struggles and efforts to make sure that Tanzania is democratized. And I was just wondering, how do you analyze that role? Are you satisfied, for example? Or what is your analysis or assessment? And you think, for example, there could be more, for example, done by NDI, for example, to support democratic processes and institutions in Tanzania?
Well, NDI works the same everywhere, Tanzania and everywhere. We are here in partnership with the people of the country. We call it demand-driven. The people of the country, including the government and civil society, political parties, if they see something that we can assist with, we can help with, we are willing to provide that assistance. We're donor driven. We get funding often from USAID, from the National Endowment for Democracy. We don't have our own sources of funding, but if our donors are also able to underwrite work, we're willing to do as much in partnership with the people of this country as they will want us to be involved.
Yeah.
And I should say something about how we are involved. What we do really is bring international experience here. This is not about, providing American model to another country. It's about sharing models of development, lessons learned from other democracies. There are many different forms of democracy around the world, but bringing those experiences to bear here so people here can learn about what people have gone through and decide what works for their system, what works for their own development. So absolutely, I feel we can do more if the people here are willing and donors are willing to split that. One thing that you mentioned is you struggled with the word struggle.
Yeah.
And I want to say, look, I say to be a democracy of any sort is to be a struggling democracy. Every democracy is a work in progress of a various kind. Whether it's the United States, and I'm sure everybody follows what's going on in the U.S. and how our democracy has been weakened with lately. It's a very difficult time for us in the United States. But all over the world, there are struggles on the democratic path. There's no perfect democracy. So I think what we're about is the solidarity among what we call small d Democrats. Those who believe in these values of accountability, of governance, transparency of governance, of inclusion of all people equally, of representation under law. That's essentially what we're talking about. With democracy, that building of global solidarity and experience to support one another as we struggle with these questions is what we are about.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think we will go back to that, but before we do that, I would like you to highlight, for example, for people who are unfamiliar with the activities that the NDI is doing here in Tanzania. So what in real time is NDI doing to support democracy in Tanzania? Yeah.
Well, as you say, we've been here almost 20 years. So it's been a variety of things, all again to support citizens and government here. Right now, women, young people, and people with disabilities has been a focus of ours to ensure that they are equally able to participate in public affairs, in public service, in government, or in civil society, in elections in this country. So we've been focusing particularly on those communities of late. We've been working in Zanzibar on their processes of national dialogue, integration in their political development, electoral reform issues, working with civil society groups on their engagement on electoral reform, electoral integrity, parliamentary reform. In the past, we worked with political parties as they engaged in electoral change and electoral reform. So it runs the gamut of what we call democratic development. So those are the kinds of work.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Mr. Mitchell, you mentioned earlier that democracy worldwide, is facing challenges. So, for example, on the one hand, in Europe, for example, or in America, we're seeing this wave of, populist leaders coming to power. And in Africa, for example, we do have populist leaders coming to power, but we have another very unique phenomenon with military coup, for example. And recent studies or researches show that there has been an increasing support for military coups. For example, recent study by Afrobarometer that many African youths, their belief in democracy is declining, while their belief in military coup is increasing. And we have seen this playing out in, the recent Niger coup, where we have these people coming to the street to the support of the military juntas. And my question is, as a Democrat, as someone who is leading an organization that, preaches democracy, working on the ground to, strengthen democratic institutions, do you really believe that democracy can deliver the necessary changes that African youth, well, the youth is a worldwide, but I just want to narrow it down to African youth because we are in Africa, we are in Tanzania. Do you believe that democracy can deliver the changes that the Tanzanian youth, for example, or African youth is aspire to? Can you defend democracy?
Yes, absolutely. I do believe that democracy delivers. There's no doubt. And every study suggests that over a period of time, over decades, that over a 25-year period, that countries develop 20% more if they are democratic than they are not. And there's a logic to it. If we break down what we mean by democracy, I think this is where people get unclear or get confused. And people are frustrated by the way democracy is functioning or the way that elections are not leading to change that they want to see. And they may equate democracy with simply elections. And elections are not full what democracy is all about. It's an event. It is an important moment, but it is not the meaning of democracy. I imagine young people are frustrated. They want a voice. They want to say, they want to see that their government is responsive to them. It is delivering on their needs. It is providing jobs, providing very practical things for their lives. And they're seeing that governments are not. Even when they go and elect people, it doesn't lead to results. So they get frustrated. And they look for somebody, a populist, somebody who pounds their chest and says, this is messy, this democracy, it's corrupt, give me all the power, I will deliver for you. That never works. It simply does not work. It may work for a very short period of time, or they will draw down on the capital of the country. But, for instance, you talk about the coups in Sahel.
Yeah.
The military says, we need to jump in because of the security of the country. We need this for national security. And Mali and Burkina Faso, if you look at the detail, those countries have become less secure. There's more violence, more killing, less security in the
after military coup.
Since the coup.
Yeah.
Since the coup. And the development has gone down. So, and the justice has gone down. But the actual stability and military violence from extremists in those countries have gone up.
Yeah.
But it sounds good because people are frustrated with the messiness of democracy. Now, the young people are saying, they're screaming, they're saying, we want a voice.
Yeah.
We want to have a say. That's what democracy is about. It's not simply an election and an event. It's a culture in a society of conversation, of consultation, of inclusion, and forcing the government to be responsive to the people's needs. They have to listen. They have to be held accountable. And by being accountable, they'll respond on the needs of people and you'll see progress. So it's not easy and it's not simple. It requires some time. It requires some cultural change. We can have an election tomorrow, but the culture and the mindsets take longer. But it is essential that start and continue to progress. Otherwise, you will have this false narrative, false siren song of military people. People will take the country back by saying, give me all the power, and they won't deliver.
Yeah. But then from a democratic perspective, because you are a Democrat, like what explains these military coups? And not just the military coups, but also the populist movements around the world. I mean, as a Democrat, what is your theory as to why we have this phenomenon?
It's a great question. It's a very complicated question, but it's a very good one. And we struggle with this in the United States as we try to explain what is happening at home and what we see in many places around the world. Some of it has to do with the sense of a lot of the attention and resources are going to cities and rural areas are being left behind. So there's a resentment. There's a cultural challenge, the conservative cultural norms versus more progressive or liberal norms. And people may be uncomfortable with that change. Some people are, well, some people are not. Like cities are more comfortable with more progressive liberal reform, and the countryside may be a little bit more conservative. Disparities of wealth can lead to that. Again, frustration. I think the digital, you're online. It's a great thing to get information out to more people more widely than you ever could with a single newspaper. But as we all know, that space can be poison. It can lead to disinformation, lies, hate, and division. Can spread more widely and more deeply, more persistently than ever. And frankly, the American companies, these platforms, are encouraging the extreme voices through their algorithms, through the way they're structured, which is that also, I think, poisons minds, creates more division. And we all need to be doing more to try to moderate and bring and facilitate conversation. I think the pandemic hurt a lot as well. There's no substitute for this. If we did this through a screen, there's a different connection than being face-to-face, having conversations, having discussions, connecting as human beings versus talking at each other. What you don't understand, you will fear. And I think societies are pulled apart. There's more polarization. When there's more fear, there's more division. And politicians sometimes will play on.
Yeah.
They want to get votes, and they want to sometimes prey on division and fear. And demagogues, populists, all about polarization.
Yeah, but some would say, well, we have that because the democracy has failed to deliver. I mean, at least the democracy the way we know it.
That you will say because democracy is not delivered? I think you have to define. I can't define it for you what is delivered and what is not. So I think Tanzanians have to. What is it?
No, but I mean, it's because it's a universal thing. Well, I know it's contextualized that Tanzania have our own issue, but I asked that question in the context of the global phenomenon of populism. In Africa, we have military coup, and some would say that we have this because democracy, at least the way we know it and the way we have been told that it would deliver development, it hasn't worked. For example, in Africa, 60 years of independence, many people are not satisfied with the states of their developments and said, because the democracy doesn't work.
Right. I think they're associating the problem with democracy when it's not democracy. It's not because democracy is strong, because democracy is weak. It's because there's not, what's required is more and better democracy, not less. There needs to be more conversations. You look at the quality of the democracy.
I will go with that.
Countries.
Yeah.
Are the institutions strong enough? Are the rule of law strong enough? Is the ability to have open conversations and debate and peaceful transitions of power strong enough? Are governments listening to the people and able to deliver their services to people rather than, I think what occurred oftentimes in developing countries since the 1990s, we thought it would be a natural. Open up, have elections, have multiple parties and a parliament, and somehow it will naturally deliver. But as I mentioned, it's a mindset, it's a culture, and it can't simply be an event. It has to be, if you don't, the corruption that occurred and the mindset are old words. And so I think what's happened is the same old people doing the same things with different rules and calling it democracy. They say, well, we have elections, but are the elections, truly representative? Are parliaments truly doing their jobs and overseeing and taking the popular will, constituent will, and delivering legislation and for the people? So if that's the key, is not that democracy is the problem, it's that democracy is not strong enough.
Yeah. So what I gather from what you say, what has failed to deliver is something else, not democracy. Now we have to name that. What is that?
Also another thing to say is democracy is messy and it is difficult, and it's not simply going to lead to next year everybody's going to have a job or it's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
There's a famous line that Winston Churchill, British Prime Minister, once said that democracy is the worst form of government ever created by man, except for all the others. So the question is, what alternative is there that delivers better? Some will say, they'll point to some autocratic state. They'll say, well, look how they deliver. But if you actually pierce what is that model, you could find it is not what it seems. And it comes at a major cost. And some countries are quite unique in their situation. And you take a snapshot, it looks like they deliver, but over time, the cost becomes more and more apparent. Whether it's in debt or corruption or suppression of human rights, human dignity. And I think what democracy is also very much about, it's about human dignity. It's about every individual mattering, having a voice, having a say in their communities or in their own affairs. That's the essence of it. The rest is process, the rest in details. But essentially, democracy is about the ability of people to have a say in their own affairs, to be sovereign, and to hold their governments accountable to them, rather than having to trust government to somehow be, to hold them accountable.
Here's another thing. I mean, because we explain this, the emergency of military coups, I narrow it down to Africa and Tanzania particularly. So we have had, this assumption that, the assumption that some of our politicians, for example, in Africa, in Tanzania, has been selling to the people that democracy actually is not an African thing. Yeah, I mean, it's a foreign thing. It's a Western thing. And you are a Democrat. You lead this organization that, spread democracy around the world. How would you convince an African person or a Tanzanian person that, no, actually democracy is not a foreign thing? I mean, it's not a Western thing, but how would you convince? How would you say?
I would ask them, do you want to say in your own affairs? Do you want a voice in who governs? Do you want to make sure that your government is accountable to you? You have a say and you have some transparency and insight into what your government is doing in your name with your resources. Would you like to have representatives to represent your constituencies and your interests as government makes decisions? Would you like to have rule of law so that there's not impunity and you can't be thrown in prison tomorrow for no reason except you criticize somebody in power or somebody doesn't like you? If you want that, or you break it down to what I just said, if you want those things, then you are a Democrat. So the ones who say that it's a foreign concept tend to be the ruling parties. They're the ones who want to stay in power. They have every interest in saying, no, we can't afford to have any accountability or elections, or it's an American play on the Western or anti-colonial thing. Or other countries, in order to preserve their own power, will say this is a Western thing. But be careful. I would just say those who listen to that and think about that, to understand what we mean when we talk about democracy. That it is I believe that every human being wants to, I don't care if you're African, I don't care if you're Asian, or you're Latin, or you're European, or American. Everybody wants equal dignity. Everybody wants a voice. And I think that is the essence of what democracy is all about. Autocracies say only the elites get voices. Only the one party gets voices, and you don't have a say. We know what's best for you. If you want to trust that, you can trust that, but it doesn't deliver over time.
Do you think that democracy is a condition or a result of develop? A country's develop?
It's both. I think it's both. I think it goes together. I think development, you can have development, without democracy for a period of time. There's no doubt about it. You can, if you're from a low base and you want to just put lots of investment in and build factories and roads and countries need that, that's perfectly fine. But over time, if you want to deliver on healthcare, education, or widespread development, in communities and such, governments need. Again, it's natural. I was in government. I want to know what people are thinking. That's what elections are about. It's taking the pulse of people so you get a sense of what you're not hearing when you're sitting in the Capitol. I've been here 2 days in the Capitol. I can tell you, I don't know Tanzania. I don't. I know the elite perspective of Tanzania. I couldn't know Tanzania unless I were here for a long time and traveled around and understand the voices of individuals. And that's true about governance too. That's the only way you're going to be able to deliver on the national interest, is to really get feedback. As president of an organization, I need feedback from my people in the organization. Otherwise, I'll stay up above the clouds and have a great time being president, but I won't deal with the problem.
Let's come back to Tanzania. You are here in Tanzania at very opportune time. So many things are happening. The president has rolled out reforms in politics and in many other areas. But there have been calls that these reforms must go a step further in strengthening the institutions of democracy. People mentioned, for example, the National Electoral Commission. And I just want to get your brief, analysis on why you think it's important for these democratic institutions to be strengthened and to be empowered.
Generally or for elections?
Generally. Yeah. Well, democratic institution with the press,
yes.
the electoral commission. Yeah.
Yes. And let me just say congratulations to you. I should have said at the top, this vehicle itself is wonderful with Chanzo. It's
well, thank you.
Congratulations for your success. And no, honestly, this is what's important, is this kind of dialogue and discussion and challenging and questioning and all of the rest. I think what you're doing is it's fantastic. You need a free media.
Sure.
If you don't have a free media to get information to people, to hold those people accountable in government, ask hard questions of people who are doing things in your country, like NDI. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? What are you about? You should know. Your citizens should know.
Yeah.
They should be questioning everyone and everything. So you need that free media. You need civil society. All the reasons that I said.
Yeah. And what's your role as NDI to achieving that isnt? And
here is to be supportive of those institutions, to help them build their capacity, to ensure they are fully inclusive, to bring international experience, others from the outside, of how they've worked on these things in environments like in Tanzania at similar points of development. So you can feel solidarity, you can feel support, and you can build that capacity. And again, those are the building blocks of democracy. I keep saying it's not elections. It's all of the rest of this stuff that makes a democracy and make it strong and functional and make it deliver. And if you don't have it, if you don't have a strong media, if you don't have strong civil society, you only have part of it, then, and it doesn't deliver, people go, oh, look, democracy doesn't deliver. No, it all has to work together in order for there to be some progress. And again, it's not going to be overnight. People need to manage their expectations. But at least that's the best form of society and governance that we have found yet to work.
Well, Mr. Mitchel, thank you very much. I would very much I like to keep this conversation going, but time is not that friendly, and I know that you have other schedules to perform. And I would like to once again thank you very much for accepting to come to this show and have this conversation with us.
Thank you. It's my honor, and again, congratulations
on
what you've started here.
Thank you. Well, that was it. We had just this conversation here with Mr. Mitchel. Mr. Mitchel is the president of National Democratic Institute, a US-based non-profit, non-partisan organization that supports democracy worldwide. I was Khalifa Said, and on behalf of all those behind the camera, Stephanie Gimbi, Tony Alfred, Joseph Kirati, and Sandy Kubaya, country's director, country representative of NDI in Tanzania, we would like to say thank you very much, and we'll keep in touch. Bye-bye. Thank you very much, and wishing you all the best. Yes.